All right. Well, then we will go ahead and get started. So our two main agenda items, like I mentioned before, is Mark Falkowski. Am I saying that right? Okay. Our new general counsel, he is going to be presenting on attorney-client privilege. And then we have Mike Leary right after him, and he is going to be presenting his research findings from his employee fellowship. So I'll turn it over to you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you very much. I feel like Mike has it really good following up attorney-client privilege. Anything will be likely more exciting than that topic, but it is important. And I want to talk about a couple other things more broadly. First, thanks so much for having me, and really nice to meet everyone and see everyone. I've had been here into my third month, and I've had the opportunity to work with a number of folks on this call already on various things. So it's nice to meet everyone who I haven't met before, and it's been really great to work here so far, even though it is a very strange and unusual time to start a new job and make that transition. Everyone has made it very, very welcoming and very seamless. So not sure about what everyone's experience has been with in-house counsel before, so I think I'll just kind of start at the beginning. One of the main roles I serve is serving everyone here as my client, right? So any kind of day-to-day questions you might have that come up, legal, hopefully in nature, and they don't just become legal in nature by saying they're legal in nature. So try to keep it to things that maybe are. But I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Feel free to email me directly or call me directly. And part of that is just the day-to-day counseling and guidance that goes along with it. And that's one of the benefits of having someone in-house is they're part of your organization, presumably more familiar over time with your organization and how things work and the dynamics and the systems and the details. So able to give you better responses more quickly and not have to start from scratch every time. Similar to that and kind of related is if you do have specific questions and a lot of it is like, hey, can you check out this contract? Can you work on this policy? Here's an issue that came up with a student. Can you help me out? Or here's an issue with an employee. Can we brainstorm? And those things are great. And I love working with all departments. I guess that's another part of it. I feel very fortunate to be in the position to, work, be able to work university-wide with basically all departments and any issue that comes up. So that's something I really enjoy. But for things that are specifically like legal in nature, one best practice to follow at an organization or anywhere when you're communicating with attorneys is label your communication attorney-client privilege, like in the email line, if it is actually about legal advice. And that will become important if it does proceed into some kind of formal legal proceeding. It'll help us say, hey, this is a privileged communication. It does not have to be turned over or discovered. And it allows you to be as forthright and forthcoming with information as you can be, as you need to be with your attorney, so I can give full and complete advice. And the privilege is important. Like I said, it basically protects that communication from being turned over, but only if it's about legal advice and from a client to an attorney for the purpose of seeking legal advice. And so, kind of related, you can't just make a communication privilege just by CCing me on it or including me. It doesn't quite work like that. It actually has to be to or from me or being carried out at my direction. And hopefully that won't come up often, but as COVID-19 rolls along, you just never know what the liability minefield will end up looking like. And given that we're all trying to figure this out at the same time and there's no playbook for it, just a good practice to get in. And it takes diligence both ways too. And also related, if you want to think about, not sending mixed use emails. So if you send an email that is strictly about legal advice, keep that separate from one about general business advice or operational advice. And that will keep it cleaner and make it easier to, if we ever have to do a document review and determine what is privileged and what is not. Also, when communicating with attorneys, or I guess anyone basically, it's best practice to make sure when you're emailing me to not include conclusions or things that might be like outside of what we're talking about or either one of our areas of expertise. And I can give some examples. For example, I had a client who it was a school and they got back from winter break and there had been a water leak in the classroom and some classrooms on different floors were damaged. And there was some mold, what appeared to be mold that they thought that was black, right? And they sent me an email with a bunch of other people and said, oh my gosh, there's black mold everywhere in the classrooms. And now we have that in the record. And of course, black mold is a very serious thing, and it's different than mold that is dark in color. And it just wasn't, and that person's on mold expert. I'm not a mold expert. So just, try to be mindful that what you send could also be, everything is forever preserved in writing. We all know that, right? But just be mindful when you put things in writing to me, or I guess anyone for that matter, that we, stick to, the facts, and we don't create a record. And then we had to go back and clean that up and say, well, John, you're really not a mold expert, neither am I. We'll have someone look at it, but I don't think we can conclude that it is black mold that is now in our campus. We have to, rebuild all these classrooms or something. So that's a good example. I know, and that also gets to the point where, is if you think it might be better to just pick up the phone and call me, always feel free to call me. I can give you my cell phone number. That's totally fine. My work desk phone, if I don't pick it up, the voicemails go right to my email. So I'll pick it up and give you a call back quickly. So that might be a best practice too. If you think, hey, this is, maybe if you just, talk through this, that might be more productive as well. Not sure if this will be applicable to anyone on this call, but to the extent you ever receive in your departments or your areas any formal communications that look legal in nature, whether they be from a law firm or, they could be from the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, or from a regulator, or, it could be from a number of places, a subpoena for student records, employee records, whatever it might be. Just make sure that, you loop me in on that right away, and so we can get working on it, because some of those also carry with it short time frames to respond. And there's been some times when the client's been like, oh, by the way, I got this, EEOC complaint that's due tomorrow, got it last month, thought you should know. And we're like, oh, well, great. That's good to know. Would have been good to know a month ago. So just, it takes everyone, being vigilant and paying attention to these things to really make it work the best. But it's a great benefit to have, as everyone's probably knows on this call. Higher ed has become, for better or worse, very highly regulated. There's hundreds of laws, rules, and regulations govern basically everything from what you tell prospective students in marketing and admissions materials through, how you report their student loan repayment percentage. It's in everything in between, and it's detailed, and it's becoming more highly competitive, and also more highly scrutinized. And so there are some, there's just and this started many years ago, but there's, just a lot more liability for schools than I think people appreciated. And it's not just like we operate one line of business. We don't just, make widgets on a conveyor belt. We have every line of business, right? We have housing and dining and athletics and student affairs and events and guests and visitors and employees and different kinds of employees. And so it can be really complex really fast. So it's good that we all are, aware of those things and working together. And I'm just really excited and encouraged to be part of the team. And looking forward to working with everyone on this call, and, spread the word. If you think other people who aren't on this call, might have questions and need to come my way, I'm available and accessible. So I'm more than happy to talk whenever that time comes up.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, if there's any specific questions you think that are good for the group, I'm happy to talk about them now. Or if you have anything unique to you, I'm happy to talk about that offline as well.
Anyone have any questions?
I cannot provide personal legal advice either. It's the university. If you get speeding tickets, I don't know what I could do for you. Not my area.
It's too bad. Well, we have had a lot of discussion before you were hired about contracts and processes, and I have a feeling that going forward we will become very well acquainted. And I guess if I had a question, it would really just be surrounding the process of different types of contracts. And is that something you're looking into putting in place for?
Yeah, definitely. So great questions. Yeah. So one thing that I got feedback pretty quickly upon arrival was, the contract process. So Oren has been great to work with, and Christine, we've had a couple meetings and are looking at updating the workflow in Workday and some of those questions. And it was challenging too. And so I'm probably up to almost 70 different contracts I've worked on since I've been here. At my old, so I was so before this, I was general counsel for a place called Columbia College. I reviewed over 200 contracts a year for them, but they're somewhat similar. They're a private, not-for-profit school like Lindenwood a few more students, a lot more online, but they had like 20,000 students at one point online. And so much more dispersed operations, but also some traditional stuff. And before that, I was at a big law firm and worked in the higher ed practice group and represented tons of, they represent over 250 different schools in different capacities. So this is an issue at every school. And the challenge is schools have a ton of different types of contracts, right? There's MOAs, MOUs, partnership agreements, actual purchase orders, statements of work. But there just can be a variety of different things. So it's hard to get one size that fits all.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes it's like the square peg round hole kind of concept where we'll do our best. And so I think for definitely, and then there's like the spending authority and signatory authority policies. So there's a lot going on there. And we want to get it right, and it's important to get right. But yeah, so that's one thing I've identified that I'm working on to hopefully make, as easy as possible from the user perspective too. I mean, I don't want people to be waiting on me ever, or any event or engagement to ever be impacted by my timeliness or untimeliness. So if you could get those to me as soon as possible. But yeah, we are working on something, especially for those contracts that require purchases and this, expenditures of money, that those are going to hopefully start flowing more through Workday. And that's great because that also centralizes them and keeps them all maintained. But again, and I think it's helpful to know that my review is strictly from the legal perspective as well. If we need to do some maintenance on the roof, like I don't know what kind of roof nails they need, right? So that's not what I look at. I look at it from the legal perspective, from the risk and liability, what's shifted, what are we sharing, what makes sense, are there ways to terminate? And so that's my spin on it. And other people who originate the contracts are responsible, obviously, for the substance and content of the material terms of it. But yeah, so that is something we're working on. I forget where Christine is working on it, but I think she's working on, we had another call probably less than 2 weeks ago about it. And so there's another round of changes happening. But yeah, that's something definitely in great feedback and an important thing. But like I said, yeah, I definitely don't want the workflow to ever be bogged down with me. And I think that's an area, and that's the other thing too. I think you guys were using outside counsel for a while, and that's good, but their take on it is probably just a little different than the in-house take as well. They might go through everything and want to push back and fight about everything, but I reviewed thousands of contracts too, and it's just, you have to use some level of perspective and be practical about what is important and what's not important to fight about in a contract, and realize that the goal is to support, for me, is to support the business operations too of everyone's department. And so, we just need to make sure we balance that and walk that fine line. Similarly, I think policies are another thing I've heard people talk about, but one kind of longer term thing, I think Mike and Bethany are really going to be integral to that project, is to try to centralize and get some kind of online central policy in place for everything to be. And that will be a lot of work, but it's important to do. I've done it for other schools, both public and private, in Missouri and outside of Missouri. So we'll get working on that, but that should hopefully help everything be in one place. Everyone can find it, work on the same policies, and it's just beneficial. And we don't have, then we can deduplicate the website at the end and get rid of any conflicting or old policy versions as well. Mm-hmm. But policy management is a big important part of it for schools, which is also unique because in employment, employers typically don't have their other, private employers, their policies outward facing, but schools are very transparent with the students and everyone wants to find it. So it's a little bit unique, but also important to do. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and so and that's another good point, Brittany, thanks for bringing that up. If you have other items or topics that you think might just be good for me to look into or want to work on together, just let me know too, or say, hey, this is not working so well. Can you look into this? Or can we work on trying to improve this? Or here's the situation. What can we do to help? So it's great to be proactive too. A lot of it, unfortunately, when I'm only one person, is reactive. That's just the nature of it. But to the extent we're able to work on things proactively, I think that goes a long way as well.
That's really encouraging to hear. I know there are a lot of us that deal with contracts. And so for right now, are we supposed to send contracts to you directly, or should we still go through the process?
Yeah, I think it depends what it is. So if it's like, if it requires a purchase order and someone to cut a check or pay a vendor or a third party entity, like, yeah, those should still be going through Workday. But and ultimately, I think all of them will probably go. But like, if it's a partnership agreement, or something like that, or sometimes Diane has a bunch of them from her areas that don't always fit within that mold quite right.
Mhm.
Those ones, yeah, or if you just don't know, contact me directly too, and we can talk about it if you have questions about it. I think the goal is to someday get them all to go through Workday, realizing that it might not be a perfect fit for everything.
Right. Right. Warren, did you have anything you wanted to share on that topic?
No, not specifically. We're hoping to get that transitioned over to the new process more sooner than later, considering we're in the middle of our audit. Christine's time is valuable to me personally,
Yeah.
to make sure that the audit gets taken care of. So to Mark's point, she just got back from vacation. We just had a call this morning with her and kind of talk through what we need her to do moving forward, and that's on her radar to get that wrapped up and move forward. But we got year-end stuff we got to take care of first. So we will, over the summer, we'll have some more answers. We're already cleaning up the supplier contract process, which I know is important to a lot of people, and we're trying to simplify that. And Shonda and I are working together on that as well. So there's more to come on that. We hope with Mark in-house that'll help, because we know that some of that review of the legal side was kind of delayed with outside counsel. So I know in the long run this is going to get better, but we'll hopefully have some answers before the start of the semester.
Yeah, that's right. I think not only was there a delay, but I think it was extremely expensive in some cases too. I mean, and if you just send it over to outside counsel, they're going to take it seriously and look at every aspect and run everything to ground, which adds up very fast. Even for sometimes I think the fees can be greater than the cost of the contract, which is interesting. So I'm encouraged. I love talking to Oren and Christine about it. I really like those conversations, and I think we'll be able to do some really good things.
Well, it sounds like you've been brought up to speed, and I think we're all very grateful for that. Thank you for being here. We truly appreciate your service, and you are more than welcome to stay on the call if you'd like and listen, but feel free if you've got to go. And thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I've talked to Mike enough. We got calls later this week. I know he's doing great things.
Yes.
So I think I might hop off. But yeah,
Okay.
Thank you so much. It's really great to connect with everyone. And maybe, to the extent there's other things that roll out, maybe I could be a regular guest, and happy to answer any questions if you ever want me back too.
We will certainly have you back. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye. All right, Mike, we will turn it over to you and your strategic communication strategies that you have discovered through your research.
Thanks, Brittany. I really appreciate the time to talk through this. I'll try to be as brief as possible. There's a lot more to talk about here that I encountered during this past year of work that HR supported. I'm trying to hit some highlights here and look forward to your questions and comments. I'm also excited to get to the share screen portion, which I'm about to do, because Joe's background is making me a little nervous.
I couldn't tell if he was talking or laughing about us or someone else earlier, but.
It's a mixture, Brittany.
And looking at the list of folks here, I know most of you. It's good to see and meet a few of you that I have not met. I'm the director of the Office for Research Compliance here at Lindenwood. Just to orient you in case you're unfamiliar with what we do, this slide covers the subunits and processes that the Office for Research and Compliance manages and administrates, nearly all of which, except for one of these little bubbles one or two of these little bubbles on the third tier, are brand new to Lindenwood within the past three and a half years or 4 years. We manage all grants and external agreements and sponsored projects. We manage the IRB, which is the committee federally mandated to oversee research involving human subjects and data. We work with faculty interested in animal, wildlife, and fieldwork research, intellectual property, and we administrate the Environmental Health and Safety Committee as well. So there's a lot of process, and Mark referred to the amount of laws and regulations that go into higher ed in our era, and ORC with a very hefty slice of those when it comes to research and management, fiscal management of projects and grants and partnerships. So for the past year with this fellowship, I was given the opportunity to deal with a question that I've always wanted to work with. Frankly, I've been doing this work in research and compliance and research ethics in higher education for quite a long time now. And this is an area that I haven't had time to explore and work on, which is really critical for Lindenwood. And looking at the list of people in this meeting, just back of the napkin, I've worked with, I think, about 60% of you directly in some type of research project, data management project, external agreement, or partnership, or something that falls within the orbit of research, scholarship, creative activity, and innovation at Lindenwood. And we're staff. So part of what's happening at Lindenwood is a recognition that to cultivate the kinds of partnerships and agreements and projects and experiences that we want, it really takes a village to cultivate a project that spreads beyond just faculty and deans into the types of expertise that we have even here represented on this phone call from all of our areas, all the way from enrollment into student affairs. So the primary question that I wanted to work with during this fellowship was around strategic communication. How can we advance our culture of research, scholarship, and creative activity by enhancing the patterns of communication we have at Lindenwood? But from my perspective as a staff person and administrator, questions about communication are always questions really about people and roles. So the more, I think, on the ground question here that I was trying to consider is how can we connect our considerable faculty and staff expertise at Lindenwood to these emerging funding, partnership, and innovation goals that we have at Lindenwood? How can we get from where we were, let's say, 5 years ago to where we want to be in a few years, which is a regional competitor known for really quality, immersive student and faculty research, innovation, and creative activity experiences. We were asked at the end of our fellowship to put together a poster. So here's an overview really of what I worked through and a snapshot of findings and where we're gonna head based on what I encountered during this year of work. And I believe, Brittany, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe these posters will be shared along with a brief video describing what happened. So I'm not gonna spend a lot of time here, but I will work through some bits and pieces of this poster quickly with you all. What I did over the year was a pretty standard type of quality improvement project, starting with focus groups with faculty, staff, and students, moved on to some very structured interviews with faculty, staff, and students as well, trying to gather information. I wanted to hear directly from you all what kinds of barriers are faced in the Lindenwood environment when it comes to communication. What problems do we have when it comes to the kinds of information that we hear, how we hear information, and what we might be able to do a bit better. And then I moved into a review of academic research on organizational communication and strategic communication. I was a bit surprised to find that there's actually not a lot of academic lit specific to strategic communication and communication problems in higher education. As you would expect, though, there is quite a bit of literature and research on organizational communication and behavior in corporate sectors and different types of environments beyond higher education. So I spent a lot of time in that, and it was really fascinating to find that after talking with so many faculty and staff and students about their experiences at Lindenwood, their experiences were matched almost directly by what researchers and academics are talking about out there in terms of enhancing communication and building good structures for communication and collaboration in environments like ours. And then that led to a bunch of new tools and spaces and workshops that we're going to be rolling out. The timeline for rolling out some of our new resources and learning spaces has been inhibited by what's transpired with us all over the past few months, but we're looking forward to getting as much as we can in place as time permits. In talking with faculty and staff, a number of themes came up in terms of barriers to communication and their felt experience at Lindenwood when it comes to knowing about things and engaging with activities and projects and Lindenwood goals and institutional aims. I won't work through each one of these, and a lot of these aren't going to be surprises to you, frankly. Things like unfamiliarity with terms and offices creating confusion, especially for an office like mine, which is brand new. It's very high context, a lot of terminology, and a lot of regulation that is somewhat new to Lindenwood. Change management issues, a need for mentorship support and training, very clear indication from faculty that personal interaction works better than hub and spoke support models, which really is traditionally what compliance offices might like mine look like. And during these interviews, I would hear things like from faculty, things like the machine is in motion and I get lost in the cracks, which is certainly what a lot of faculty might be feeling like right now with the rapid pace of change and development happening around how courses are being delivered and how we're interacting with students. When it comes to the amount and type of information that faculty see, faculty were really clear and staff were as well that at some point they just start tuning out to most of what they see coming through their email channel or the different directions that we receive information about what's happening at Lindenwood and what kind of resources are becoming available. And then a few times I ran into the problem, which none of us want to hear, but for a lot of times faculty and staff, when you share a new opportunity or a new program or office or idea that's happening at Lindenwood, they're going to say, I've never heard of that. Even though that person might have very specific expertise and interest in that thing that's happening, there's no way for them to hear about it, to engage with it. It never really filters down to them. This is something I heard from a lot of faculty and staff. So ever since I ran into this during focus groups and interviews, in the back of my mind, I have this new problem that I'm conscious of at Lindenwood, which I'm thinking of as the never heard it problem. When it comes to students, this was a really valuable exercise. We learned a lot from our students in these interviews and focus groups. This is just a stone skipping on the surface. I'd be more than happy to sit down with any of you interested in talking about the student focus group and here and how students talk about their perception of information and the delivery of information at Lindenwood and the kinds of workarounds and things that they're doing in order to try to stay engaged during their programs. But generally, students feel disconnected from the mission of Lindenwood University until pretty late in their programs when they might have some kind of experience or encounter that triggers their sense of identity at Lindenwood. They feel very isolated by discipline and activity. This was a common refrain. Students feel very disconnected from each other. They often feel like Lindenwood assumes that they know things or assumes that they're familiar with new information that they've never heard before. Just like faculty, change management is an issue. They do not like email, very poor reception to email communication. Instead, students in different areas and for different activities and in different schools rely on a pretty diverse set of communication tools, everything from Vibe and Snapchat to email systems outside the lindenwood.edu ecosystem. They do feel very connected through mentorship. They're not aware of guidance and resources unless they're introduced. We found that the class setting is really where students first hear about things, if they ever do hear about things. And a very, very common refrain was that students feel like they have no centralized access to what's happening at Lindenwood, what opportunities are available to them, and what experiences might be available. So in terms of isolation, students at Lindenwood, in this cross-section of students that we talked to came from all of our schools and disciplines and from a very diverse demographic set. They want to be connected with each other. In fact, one student said, we need to be able to figure out things together. They want to learn together. They want to be in activities that bring students from different demographics and different spaces in the institution and from different schools and disciplines. They want to work and learn together. Other students might find themselves in something like the Honors College and we were told during his interviews they'll end up in things, get an email about it or a text about it, and their first response is, I don't know. I don't know how I got into this. It's interesting, and I wish I had known about this, but I don't know how this actually happened. I just appeared in this experience or this space or with this group. And because of that, they're not able to share that experience very well with other students because they don't know what pathway was present in accessing this new experience or resource. They can't share it very well. They don't understand it, even though they find it very formative. And in the upper right-hand corner, this was one of my favorite moments in this entire fellowship experience, was a student describing coming to Lindenwood because they know this is a quality teaching institution. They get into their courses, they're learning about their discipline, they're getting content knowledge, they're gaining familiarity with tools, but they're just learning. And then later in their program, they get into some kind of activity, let's say a research activity with a faculty member, or a project or community-oriented activity with a staff person, and then the light bulb goes off. Everything they've been learning connects. They get some new sense of vocational identity with, they understand in that moment and that experience what they can do with their degree, what step they want to take next after Lindenwood University. It was wonderful to hear this from students. It was very confirmatory that later in student programs, we have a lot of opportunity at Lindenwood for students to engage with faculty and staff in specific experiences that will push them to success after graduation and will motivate them even toward successful graduation and engagement with their more advanced coursework. But this came from a slice of students that we were talking to that tend to be the type of people that are really engaged and optimistic and driven to succeed. So it leads us to think in terms of communication about what could happen if we enhanced our resources and communication in such a way that this was an expectation for students, not at the end of their program, but even at the beginning of their program, that faculty and staff were able to coordinate in such a way that this became not a bug at Lindenwood University, but a feature, given the wealth of resources that we have. This is the type of experience that we really want to support to the Office of Research and Compliance. It's one of our primary aims and goals. If you remember back, I'll go back to this first slide. This picture is a picture that we use a lot. It's one of my favorite pictures from Lindenwood University. I think about this student a lot. They're in a lab, they're learning, they're getting really solid experience in STEM. They're even getting bench experience in a lab. And everything we try to do in the Office of Research and Compliance is really focused around making this student's experience at Lindenwood University as best as possible. Helping this student imagine what they're going to do with their next step. Connecting this student with staff and faculty at Lindenwood that are going to help them develop a solid vocational imagination and be able to take that next step after they leave Lindenwood University. And so coming into the literature review, again, this is just a summary, and I'm happy to take a deeper dive with anybody that might be interested in looking in more detail at some of these things. But a lot of what I've been talking about in terms of barriers and feeling disengaged and disconnection from the mission of Lindenwood University are very prevalent as themes in academic research on organizational behavior and communication. Really, the three themes that I found throughout this lit search are engagement, climate, and identity. In terms of engagement, it's very common for key initiatives at Lindenwood University, things that all of us here feel are very important and vital to the success of students and the thriving of our institution. These key initiatives often get crowded out for faculty, staff, and students by the plethora of competing expectations, issues, and routines. So in thinking through communication, especially through my office, we've tried to become adept at identifying what's most important and finding ways to emphasize those and knowing when it's okay to keep some things on the back burner and communicate ancillary issues and secondary issues even through different channels or modalities in order to keep the most important things at the front of any of our communication cycles. Crowding out is something that I'm far more aware of before I started this fellowship. In terms of compliance, we'll look at a little table on the next slide, but I'm a compliance administrator. Lots of rules, lots of regulations. I look at everybody's stuff. Sometimes we have to review things very seriously. Sometimes we have to create ethical management plans or conflict of interest management plans. Contract reviews get very onerous and intensive. So in terms of this kind of climate, a lot of people in my shoes just take the fallback position of the traditional compliance office. Here's the rules, we manage the rules. But what can we do at Lindenwood University in our compliance areas to adapt to what is emerging within the corporate world in terms of integrity innovation cultures, which featured an entirely different feel and setting for compliance behaviors and education and support. But also these cultures moving from a compliance culture to an integrity culture feature much different communication strategies. And then the last big academic theme in the literature, which dovetails so extraordinarily well with what we found in the focus groups, is identity. Identity is a big deal. Institutional storytelling, understanding the story, the history, the future of Lindenwood University, what we want to do, who we are as a university, what kind of student we want to see come out of our programs. All of that kind of storytelling, it drives faculty and staff investment in actually engaging communication that's coming from our offices. What we ultimately want to do in any of our communication is over time create what one article I worked pretty intensively with called creating carriers of organizational culture. So we all have our roles, we have our tasks, but in addition to the discrete tasks that we all perform through our offices, we're all bearing with us representation of two students and faculty and external stakeholders of what Lindenwood is and what Lindenwood means. So how can we, through our communication habits and patterns, become carriers of organizational culture? I find that a pretty fascinating theme to engage and talk about. But moving back to that climate piece, this has been a big deal this is kind of upset the apple cart for me in terms of what a compliance office should look like and should feel like. Because I'm very adept at the compliance model, which is all about adherence and regulatory administration. It's all about preventing misconduct. So I pump out a lot of codes and standards and policy and standard operating procedure, and we're heavily reliant on auditing to ensure that faculty, staff, and students are adherent to the wide array of federal and state regulations that we have to monitor. But there is an alternative model out there, the integrity model, which has been around for some time, but it's been taking a while for it to make its way toward higher education. So this has been a fairly new set of concepts for me, in that a compliance office could look like and have the features of the tone and ethos we see in the second column here, something more collaborative, efforts toward internalizing standards and ethics, becoming carriers of organizational culture rather than just being rule followers, helping faculty, staff, and students engage responsible action without a lot of oversight or guidance. Things like developing more policy-based guidance and project-based partnerships, emphasizing good decision-making and resource development rather than auditing and just reiterating compliance standards. This particular table here has been something that is going to drive the way our compliance office looks on the research side. And I would be very interested in interacting with some of you that are involved with compliance in other areas. I'd love to learn from you, hear what your processes look like, and see what you've done perhaps to move the balance from the compliance model toward the integrity model. But all of this has been funneling, since this is a fellowship for communication has been funneling toward a strategic communication plan for the Office of Research and Compliance, which will really drive how research, scholarship, and creative activity look at Lindenwood for the foreseeable future. And given all this feedback and working through the literature and looking at strategic communication plans in higher education, this is the paradigm that I'm working with that I think is portable to other offices as well. That starting from the left-hand side, having stakeholder feedback loops where we're continuing to hear from our faculty, staff, and even our external stakeholders is critical. Contact tracing, I know that means something much different to us all now, but keeping data on who we're talking to so we know who we're talking to and about what gives us a very clear idea of what we need to work on and what kind of guidances and resources we need to produce. Personalized email training, this is a big bucket. I know Kevin Manley, for example, has been working on a research project where he's assessing effective language for emails in higher education and effective email patterns. I'm looking forward to hearing the results of what he's doing, but we have learned that leveraging email effectively, especially for faculty, is a big problem solver when it comes to communication. But then in addition to that, multi-channel communication, that we need to be coming at people with information and different types of information from all different directions, not just stuck in one specific channel like email. Teams, for example, one of my dreams at Lindenwood has been when I first got here, was to have about 3 dozen walkie-talkies that I could just hand out to people so I could be in constant contact and answer little questions and field smaller issues as they arise. But really, with all of us now being enculturated to teams, that's really happened, which has been a great thing for Lindenwood. And I think that we're going to see a dramatic, in my area at least, we've seen a dramatic increase in a personal touch and collaborative communication, even just through teams. Framing short and long-term expectations, this is a big area of communication research, actually, and how you frame what you're talking about, especially when you're asking a student or a faculty member to do something. They look for cues as to whether you're asking them to do something immediately or something that has high value, or whether you're asking them to do something that might be something farther off in the distance or might have a lower value to them. And understanding how someone's receiving that short or long-term expectation and being able to frame your email or communication to highlight exactly what you're asking a faculty member to do and to manage their expectations for that is what I've learned, especially in the corporate world, a critical element of effective communication. Values and mission reflection, again, when it comes to disengagement from the Lindenwood identity, if I had to pick a number one communication barrier at Lindenwood, it was this: students, staff, and faculty feel disconnected from the history and future and mission and goals of Lindenwood University. And we aren't quite yet all carriers of organizational culture. And then adapting to Lindenwood cycles, especially now when things are shifting so dramatically, knowing when to communicate something and knowing how to drop it into a faculty member's email box at the right time when they actually might have space to consider it. This is something we think about a lot. But so this is a bit theoretical. Here's really quickly, I'm taking up a bit of time here. We have until about 15 more minutes. Is that right, Brittany?
Yes, we do.
All right. Well, just the way this looks like in the Office for Research and Compliance is when it comes to stakeholder feedback loops, we have faculty and student research advisory groups that we leverage each semester to help us understand what we're doing, what we need, what we can do better. Contact tracing, we've developed some pretty robust data collection patterns for anytime we interact with somebody in a consultation basis or educational setting, or if we're delivering information, we track that so we know what we're saying, to whom that information is going. And each fiscal year, that helps us look back and see what we might need to do better, who we might need to engage more effectively. When it comes to multi-channel communication, one thing that we heard from nearly everybody that we talked to is that short video, I'm talking 1 minute, a minute and a half video guidance is more effective than any amount of pages of PDF guidance that I can put online, or even FAQs. That really, when it comes to getting an idea or a requirement into faculty or student workflow, a short video is the best way to do it. So we're going to be going back through all of our application processes, which are numerous, and embedding them all with short video guidances at critical steps through each of those processes. When it comes to values and mission reflection, this is something that we are trying to get creative around. One thing we're going to do here actually is produce an exhibition of research and the history of research and scholarship at Lindenwood University that will be prominently displayed down near our ORC office area, where people that are passing by can see exactly what's happened at Lindenwood in the past. People are always very surprised to learn the depth and of expertise that we've had at Lindenwood in the past, the type of research that has been conducted here, the type of creative work that's been done at Lindenwood University. We want a space for students to be able to see, this is what happened, this is what has happened at Lindenwood, this is where I am. So perhaps this is what I can be involved in, and this is what I can do during my program, and this perhaps is where Lindenwood University is heading as an institution. There are two big pieces that have come out of this fellowship that we're going to be implementing. The first is something that we've called the Research, Innovation, and Partnership Lab, or RIPPLE, and this is going to be a very brand new thing for Lindenwood. We're a bit on pause with this, given what's happening with changes to in-person interactions on campus. But what we're imagining is an actual space that we'll have, and ORC staff will be managing this space for all types of collaborations and activities. Essentially, this will be a space to resolve a lot of these communication problems that we're experiencing between faculty, staff, and students. For project-based work, data evaluation, research, scholarship, creative, whatever it might be, we want this kind of collaborative startup environment for people to come into and work through a project from start to finish, where we can help connect them with partnerships, with Lindenwood staff and faculty expertise, coordinate between opportunities that we know are happening in different areas. We're going to be developing a faculty and staff research mentor core. These will be faculty and staff that has significant research and evaluation expertise that will be able to pair with junior faculty or advanced students that are looking to get their first project up and off the ground, or get a more advanced research experience going. This will also be a space for our new centralized research core resources. There's a lot to talk about there, so I'll pass over that, and I'm happy to talk about what our research cores are going to look like with any of you if you're interested. But this will also be a primary space when it comes to research, scholarship, and creative activity, and fostering more community and civic engagement support, and also strategic communication problem solving within our schools and disciplines. And this will also be the space where we'll be producing and creating these micro workshops that we're going to be embedding across the full panoply of applications and processes that we do in the Office for Research and Compliance. Lots of stuff here in terms of 15 to 30-minute conversations with faculty and staff about tools for evaluation and remote research, strategic planning for research and evaluation goals, grant writing and administration. We're going to be doing a lot of work on embracing diversity in research, data, and evaluation. And we're bringing on board a bunch of tools for dissemination and implementation of findings in research and evaluation, essentially more tools for us to share what we're doing as faculty and staff and students, so that when we accomplish something significant, it's more visible, it can be picked up and used by other people, not just at Lindenwood, but even outside of our institution. A second big piece, which I hope you've already seen. If you haven't, send me an email so I can add you to the list. But we created the Innovation Hub Digest as the primary email space for sharing our news about what's happening on the research, scholarship, and creative activities side, new opportunities, resources, successes. I hope to do a lot of cheerleading through this portal because our faculty and students are doing a lot more than people know. Winning awards, sharing their research at national conferences, getting very serious publications out there. We want a place to cheerlead and support and really to see what's happening, you know, on a weekly and monthly basis in terms of innovation and advancement at Lindenwood. If you don't receive this already, please let me know and I'd be happy to add you to the list. That was a quick snapshot, really a lot there. Just kind of skipping across the surface of what I learned. Again, I would love to talk with any of you, especially those in compliance areas, about problem solving that you've done that might be similar to some of the things you've seen on this slide, or I'm happy to talk about developing a specific strategic communication plan for your office with some of these pieces. But this last slide is results. Even just within this year, implementing some of these attitudes and behaviors and processes within ORC has resulted in a pretty substantial growth in engagement, and not just internally but externally. For example, you know, last year, like I said, I do this contact tracing where I track everybody that I talk to, everybody we talk to, and what we talk about and what department or school they're in, et cetera. Fiscal year 19, I charted 117 consultations. Fiscal year 20, we bumped that up to 231, which is a pretty significant uptick. Fiscal year 19, this is a really good signal. I processed 3 external agreements, which are standard agreements that we develop, like a memorandum of understanding with a local nonprofit or a regional agency to conduct some kind of research partnership or some kind of evaluation project or community engagement project. And this year, by the end of fiscal year 20, we had processed 9 external agreements. This is a good signal because these kinds of agreements are hard to produce. It means that we're having to connect faculty and staff in the right way at the right time with an external partner to produce some kind of project. And seeing these numbers bump up means that we're doing that work of connecting more effectively this year than we did last year. And then in terms of the numbers, fiscal year 19, these numbers are still a little hard to catch when it comes to external grant revenue. But in fiscal year 19, we brought in about $187,000 in external grants. These are commercial entities or federal entities or nonprofits paying Lindenwood faculty to produce certain types of research projects or to evaluate certain types of community issues, or even we do clinical research in the exercise performance and nutrition lab. Fiscal year 19, we were about 187. By the end of fiscal year 20, we, from what we can tell, see about $350,000. That's a pretty significant bump. So let's say we continue that trajectory. Where will we be in fiscal year 21? I'm not sure, but I'm looking forward to seeing where that is. You know, and informally, we're still kind of crunching these numbers, but last year I processed, I think it was 12 grants. By the end of this fiscal year, we had processed 32 grant applications. And all of that is because we're able to coordinate these staff and faculty resources more effectively. So this communication issue might seem a bit nebulous. It might seem like an add-on, but it has a very direct bearing on the bottom line, fiscally and in terms of our engagement with external stakeholders at Lindenwood. So thank you for letting me have a little more time here to talk through this fellowship. This is actually the first occasion I've had to talk through some of the things that we found with faculty and students and in the literature. I hope you found it interesting. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mike, thank you very much for presenting that to us. I really appreciate getting to hear it all encompassing, and I know I wrote down several things that were either reminders or something new that I can start to try. The reminder that I wrote down was short videos. I think sometimes we put a lot of words in emails, but I can probably make it a little bit easier if I just do a short video and put those instructions there. So I'll be doing that. But what would you say, my one question is, as leaders here on this call, we are leading people, we're leading departments across the entire university. From your research, what would you say that we could do today to better our communication?
I would say to sit down with your staff and talk about this piece about becoming carriers of organizational culture. I think that's crucial because all of us are interacting with faculty and students in different ways, but students especially respond to communication from us all when it's consistent. And I think the consistent piece of that can be this concerted understanding of what Lindenwood is and where we're headed, that we're part of something that's pretty incredible happening here in St. Charles, and that as leaders, that we're taking time to step back and reflect on that. And it's so easy, especially in times like this, to get lost in the drama of what's happening and all these little bits of process that we're implementing and pieces of communication we're sending out. The tendency is to start crowding out what's important. And what's of primary importance for students, especially in terms of, during the recruitment process and counseling and engagement. I work with students pretty frequently on the research and scholarship creative activity side. And it's, in my experience, has always been crucial to drop in some kind of element about what Lindenwood means and what we're trying to do collectively. And having that drive how we communicate and the tone and ethos of our communication. I think that's a pretty crucial immediate piece.
Thank you.
The second piece is, if you don't already have one, to sit down and actually map out a strategic communication plan by month so that you know exactly what kinds of bits of information you're sending out in each annual cycle, that you can see it, plan for it. That ensures that you're not missing anything. It also ensures that you're not crowding out the crucial information because you're sending out when. I think that's a good second step.
I really appreciated what you said about identifying the most important things and communicating those in a similar pattern. Does anyone else have any questions for Mike? I know we're running out of time. All right, well, since I have the floor, I'm going to give you my one update and announcement. Self-evaluations are due tonight at midnight. I've had a few questions of whether or not they're due at 11:59 or midnight, but it's just midnight. So let us know if you need anything, and look for another email where you will register for these meetings this way. And if you have any trouble, let me know. Thank you very much, Mike. We appreciate all that you shared with us. Bye, everyone.